Okay, guys, after some quick technical difficulties were figured out, we are back. This is Devin of Defcon Economics with Chris Marcus of Arcadia Economics, the author of The Big Silver Short. Somebody I would call the eminent name, other than perhaps maybe David Morgan, in silver research, in the silver domain. When I think of silver, I think of Chris. So Chris, hopefully we've got our audio. Hopefully we've got the internet all situated. And I'm going to just kind of roll through some questions for you. We'll get some answers from you, and hopefully we'll educate a couple of the younger bucks and gals running around out here these days. So I started off by thinking we could discuss just inflation in general, and again, what the young people really need to hear about, not just even inflation, but economics in general. Chris Marcus's take.
Sure. Well, what people are seeing right now is a very old trick that's been repeated for hundreds or thousands of years, because there's a couple of ways that government gangs can get money. They can tax people, which you notice. You can borrow it, and when you run out of people to borrow from, historically, they start printing money, because most people don't understand it. You know, if your bag of chips goes up from 99 cents to 102 over a year, you know, you may not think about that. But I guess what I've discovered is that this idea I was born in 1978, growing up thinking Uncle Sam, you know, they're trying to make sure we're safe, and some of these guys are just idiots, and you know, like weapons of mass destruction, you never get any answers. I was running from the dust cloud on September 11th, and there's a whole host of mysteries. No one ever asked Dick Cheney. George Bush is gone. You know, then fast forward a couple of years later, I'm working on Wall Street and housing market collapses. I just come from Wharton and Moody's, and I'm thinking, gee, aren't I the guy who was trained to see stuff like this? So fortunately, I started reading the people who had seen it in advance. They were all talking about gold and silver. They were all talking about what the Fed is actually doing. There's a reason that people don't understand this. It's a robbery. It's a broad day bank robbery, and it's designed to be confusing. And at least one way that over the years it's helped to fit in context in my mind is like what you see in Goodfellas or the Godfather movies, where there's these gangs or cults or whatever you want to call them, and maybe there's one for the US, there's one for Russia. I mean, most of the governments I've seen, they're doing the same silly things, you know, printing money. This idea that government is keeping people safe by forcing untested drugs, which there's increasing evidence that a lot of people are having very adverse reaction. And now you have this government corporate matrix where that's coercion. Oh, we're going to fire you if you don't drug. That is killing people now. People have died from this. So these are not, I think that's the biggest part, because the math is simple enough. Devin, you said you read the book, The Big Silver Short. When you actually hear what's been going on that they don't tell you on CNBC, it's easy to understand quickly, but it's just hard for people to accept, oh my God, the people that we thought we were entrusting our power to at least do their best, well, it turns out they've been corrupted a long time ago, and that can be a lot to handle mentally, although fortunately it's nice you're doing what you're doing, because when people have it explained, I think it can be life-changing.
100%. You know, I did a video recently called A Primer on Inflation, and what I do is I run my family members through my videos, praise their souls for being willing to do that. And they, you know, I want to make sure that any video I make, for the most part, people can walk away with more information than they came to it with. And when I asked her, I was like, okay, so how do you feel about that video? She said, wow, basically, you know, like I did not realize that's how it works. And there's a lot to be said, I think, about the fact that 90% of the financial markets are locked up behind all this jargon, all of these debt instruments, all of these financial advisors who, you know, they want you to go buy government bonds that are not even somewhat keeping up with inflation, not even somewhat keeping up. And you know, it's absolutely stunning to me that there's just an absolute lack of education from any sort of mainstream source that I can find. There's just no education out there for people. Do you think that's intentional, or do you think that just a lot of people are unaware and so the information doesn't spread?
I mean, it's probably a mixture of both. Yes, at this point now, I do think a lot of what we know is certainly life in America is kind of orchestrated and pre-planned. The COVID thing seems very, I mean, there's plenty of evidence for anyone. I mean, you look at Bill Gates and the John Hopkins, what was it, Agenda 21?
Event 201.
You know, you can look at who owns these vaccines, who's profiting off of these vaccines, who's been caught lying, and we don't have to get into all that. But yeah, that's hard to, especially when you see these things and you know what's going on. But I mean, I think it's an important time for people doing things like what you're doing, because
thank you.
Yes, the people are lying to you. And yes, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. Although probably that's the same thing that people said in the 40s in Germany. This reminds me, and I don't say this lightly, but you hear people, historians or, you know, or people who were alive during that time period, and they say, even when this was happening, as it was happening, you were warning people to get out. And they're like, oh, no, well, and then, you know, so there's a history of the, and I think it's hard for people to comprehend that something like that could be happening in today's day and age. Yet I would suggest the best piece of advice I can give anyone, by all means, don't make a decision or do anything just because I say it, or because Devin, you say it. But I would highly suggest looking up these things. I can understand they may sound shocking, but go find out this idea that, well, the same banks that always melt down the economy, when they crash it again, we're just going to give the Fed, which is not even a government organization, more cash. That's all that is. So I think it's a time where people would really be well served to think about what makes sense to them. And just because Joe Biden or CNBC says it, they have a long track record of saying stuff that isn't true. So I'd be careful on that one.
Well, and you know, one of my favorite examples of mainstream media getting it wrong is the Jim Cramer Bear Stearns incident, right? We all remember that. You know, I actually can't say it without laughing. It's
Jim Cramer also. Jim Cramer, I used to walk past on the New York Stock Exchange back about 10 years ago or so. He also was a very strong advocate of Lenny Dykstra, who I believe ended up in jail. And certainly I, as an option trader, when I read his option column, that was not good advice, as I think it went to court.
Oh, wow.
Of course, there's also Ben Bernanke and Hank Paulson, who were telling us about how subprime was contained even as it was happening. Which is interesting. Last time I watched that movie, The Big Short, picked up something at the end I had never noticed. That scene where Mark Baum, I guess, is on the roof, and he's saying they knew they were going to get bailed out. So Hank Paulson was in there. That's the former Goldman Sachs leader.
Yeah,
he was Treasury Secretary. So the whole time they could bet on these shitty mortgages. They didn't have to care because they knew they have these guys planted in the government too. Yeah. So it's like they can sit there and pretend, oh, we're concerned, oh, the stock's down, but hey, they knew they were going to get the money. These things are set up in advance. It seems like a very slimy, unpleasant way to live life, to spend all of your time concocting schemes like that. But fortunately, they're not too good at it once you actually look under the hood. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to make careers for themselves catching these guys, because for a long time, everybody was afraid to say anything to the naked emperor. But now that's getting easier and changing. And I think for people who are looking for opportunity, it is most certainly out there.
Yeah. Oh, you know, having gone back, I've studied quite a bit of history. I am just probably like the biggest nerd ever, honestly, when it comes to history. I absolutely love it. I can't get enough of it. I continually study like the Roman Empire, how they began, the prosperity, how they began to debase and basically just defile their entire society over long periods of times. And then right towards the end, even all the way back then, the people in control were keeping a certain narrative propagated throughout the public, and that's what maintained control for so long. But when people realized, okay, I have the power within this economic system to make a change, that's when change started occurring. And I am a follower of the Wall Street Silver forum, and as you know, they post all sorts of just interesting to fantastic articles. And I saw one where basically a guy, I believe, I'm trying to remember his name, on the forum, I believe it was Austrian something. He basically said, look, hyperinflation, while it's horrible, shows you at least one thing. It shows you that it isn't the currency that they needed to control. It was the people the whole time. It was the people's confidence in that currency. And the longer that went on, the longer they were able to steal and transfer wealth from the people to the government. And I just thought that was important to point out, that it is the people here who have the opportunity. Like you just said, there is opportunity abounding all over. I'm a small business owner. My wife and I started a small cleaning business. It's all natural and organic, and we have a fun time doing it. And we decided, hey, there's no labor out there. We're just going to hop onto this and we're going to start getting some income, right? And we did, and it's been fantastic. And then we've just, it's while everybody else is kind of looking and being afraid, we're making maneuvers. We're trying to move ahead. And so that's what these videos, I really want them to be intended for, is to educate people. And exactly what you just said, opportunity is everywhere. People need to know about it. And now, speaking of opportunity, Chris, I would not have you on without talking specifically, of course, about silver. So I'd love, because I tell everybody about gold and silver nonstop. I keep all mine vaulted, so I'm not worried about people coming to meet me. I only have one or two collectible pieces, but I tell them about it because it's got a 5,000-year history as a store of value and wealth preservation. It's not a currency to me, it's money. And I think people need to understand that. But could you give people kind of Chris's take on silver? And I know it'll be a good one, honestly.
Well, maybe for someone who's new, if you think of silver as the inverse of the dollar. So if you think that what you've seen out of government and Wall Street is going to fracture, that's what silver and gold have represented, the inverse of that. Or put in other words, until 1971, the dollar was supposed to represent a certain measure of gold. Now, Nixon comes along when our government got hijacked and takes it off that, and they've just been printing money ever since. And usually it's the people in the government or the banks that get first crack at that, and it's not so good for everyone else. So
yeah,
but here's the thing: we've printed so much money last day, let alone week or years, since 1980. Yet silver, which hit 1980, $50 in 1980, and actually what few people I believe are aware of is, had you not had the manipulation by the COMEX and the CFTC back then, where amongst other things, they made it illegal to buy. This is that same piece of junk CFTC that we caught red-handed tamping down the price this year. They're just supposed to regulate it.
Yeah.
But the guys who own the COMEX, they were short a lot of metal. So, if any of these schemes sound familiar, it's the same thing repeated over and over again. Yet despite all this money printing, all of the debt, silver, which hit $50 in 1980, is trading $22 or $23 today, as we're getting 7% inflation prints.
Yeah.
So, whereas on the other hand, you have Bitcoin, which I think many people view as an alternative currency. What was Bitcoin? Started at $1 and it's 50,000 now.
I met somebody who told me they bought Bitcoin at some odd cents, that they bought it at like 70 cents when it very first came out because they just thought it was cool or something like that. It was some ridiculously low number.
So what if silver should have, or why wouldn't you expect silver to have some sort of move? Maybe not that extreme, but every stock, I mean, we're in another tech bubble. So companies that don't even have earnings, I mean, To all of that is that essentially, and the suppression of it, which inversely is the lifeblood of the dollar, the last pin holding it together.
We sorry, Chris, we lost you for just that last bit. If you can give us that last bit one more time.
So if you as the inverse of the dollar, and then you think about all these things, whether it's blowing up people in Iraq for weapons of destruction that not only didn't exist, documentation later that they knew damn well it didn't exist, or whatever happened with September 11th, or all these wars, or that, you know, the US sends tanks here, Joe Biden sends $1 trillion here. All of this stops when you can't print dollars. And historically, silver and gold soaring has been the end of every single paper currency in history. And that's what the market is trying to do now. So 10 years ago, you would have these guys come, they'd sell a ton of paper silver, and people would get freaked out and they would sell. But now enough people have started to realize the 3-card Monte game that JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs are playing. And if you're wondering why I feel comfortable naming them specifically, I have an evidence file that if anyone could get any of their lawyers to even see me and talk about the discovery process, I'll give you a silver ounce for that. But they know. They've been running a Ponzi scheme. That's why they don't defend themselves. That's why they don't say anything. And the secret is getting out. So now when the price comes down, people are buying more metal. That's why you saw Silver Squeeze weekend. That's why you saw the LBMA admit they were weeks away from running out, and their own fears emerged. The only thing that's happened since then is that people that, you know, you have this government running out of cash at the same time. We'll see when the final end mark is. Gee, it sure feels like it's getting close to me.
Yeah, I have to agree. You know, I think one of the hardest parts for me personally when I'm talking to people about some of these things is how at the beginning you mentioned that it can just be sometimes hard, right, to believe and accept that people that you were told from the time you were small all the way up till, you know, basically now, those very same people would do their job, just do their job. It's not even about, are they good? Are they bad people? They just needed to do their job. And that is not being done. Very much so. It's very clear. It's very blatant. It's very obvious. And, you know, I'm kind of known in my home as the kind of like the predictor, if you will. And the reason is that I listen to gentlemen like yourself and other people who it's once you know, you can't unknow these things. Once you figure out that currency is currency and can never be money, once you figure that out, and then you realize that the only permanent stores of wealth that have been wealth for a very long time are gold and silver, that's all easy for me personally. But the hardest part was figuring out, how do these Federal Reserve board members, how do ex-Goldman Sachs people, how do these people get into these banks afterwards? Why is there no regulation? Why is there, or let me rephrase that, why is there such poor regulation? And I, you know, it absolutely blew me away when I finally figured out that what you said in the beginning was absolutely correct, that your government nearest to you is the most successful collection of thugs and gangsters around you, you know? And I think that people need to realize that gold and silver are also, I follow Lynette Zhang, and she points out they operate outside of the system. They are not, they don't require a bank's approval. They don't require the Federal Reserve to control the supply or anything like that and reel it in or push it back out. These are just hard assets, right? And they hold value. They're difficult to get. You have to hunt for these. You have to test for them. Then you have to mine it, extract it, smelt it down. It's what's called hard money, guys. And so this is why we have Chris on, because he's got an intricate and deep understanding of how all these layers of not even conspiracy, just people not even doing their job right, though I would argue it's conspiracy at this point, have come together to really pull a veil over the average person's eye. Because if I, like my mother, for example, whom I love dearly, I said to her, hey, you should look at getting yourself some silver. You just bought yourself a home. You got a new car. You've got all your creature comforts, your animal comforts, all these things. Look into investing for your future, right? And of course, I'm her 27-year-old son. She's like, whatever, you young silly guy. But the thing is that I'm not telling her this from my perspective. This is a perspective that comes from many different people, from Andy Schechtman, from Bix Weir, to just all the group of you and your people and other people who really do a good job. There's some new channels out there like Economic Ninja, Nobody Special. I like to always talk about them. They're doing a good job. And it's the education, I think, that's going to change everything. The education of really 3 points. One is, no, the government doesn't love you or care about you or even know who you are. And if they do know who you are, that's probably not a good thing. 2, you are responsible for yourself. I think a lot of people put that responsibility for finance and economics out there into the world, out there into, oh, well, I bought this stock because so-and-so said it. So it didn't go well and now it's so-and-so's fault. Well, no, really, in my personal opinion, it's actually you need to yourself do some due diligence, do some research. You need to read books like Chris's book, The Big Silver Short, because first of all, I want to plug your book for a minute. I went through that book with one heck of a skeptical mind, because anytime somebody's like, go buy something, my brain says, okay, hang on, wait a minute. So I read that book and I was like, well, I'm going to read this book. And right after I read your book, China shut down. And right when that happened, I knew I had to go buy silver. And not only that, Chris, I'll tell you, this is how I'm very proud of this. I bought it $11, so much silver. And to everybody out there who's upset, like, I'm sitting pretty right now in my silver. My wealth appreciated with silver. And so many people I hear negative on silver. They're, oh, silver, it's so low, it's so this, it's so that, it's the worst investment of from 2020 to 2021, all these horrible things that I keep hearing. But what people don't seem to understand is that precious metals are also a long game. So those 3 things, government isn't your friend. Precious metals are a long game, and people need to educate and take responsibility. They need to educate themselves, get some responsibility, and stop trusting these people. Stop trusting government officials who tell you, sorry, Chris, I'm getting a little heated here, who tell you that you are not essential. You are very fucking essential. Without you, they don't have anything. You are actually a form of wealth. And that's why these fuckers, pardon my French, want you to listen to them and to be their little slave, to go listen to Jim Cramer, to go listen to people who don't deserve a fucking second of your time. So I just had to throw that out there because, it's hard. It is hard. I get it for a lot of people to educate, to take responsibility, but I just think it's important, Chris. I don't understand, I'm going to get real here. I don't understand how people walk around so confused, but don't do any research. Like, have you yourself found a way to educate people maybe without getting frustrated? Have you? Because I personally haven't yet.
Well, I mean, there's the challenge. I can understand the people are frustrated with silver. I mean, some people have been waiting for a long wait. I think the reason it's been so long is that this is a crime scene. It's not, when I left the trading floor, I'm going to sit in here analyzing the shit if it just comes down to whenever a bunch of bankers hammer the bids. So yeah, I think handling that, I mean, even aside from the silver, I don't know, when my mom wanted to come visit me here, she had taken a vaccine. And from what I've heard, I'm not sure if it's safe, because I keep hearing of blood clotting issues with people who've taken the vaccine. So it's like stuff like that. Those are the mentally hard days, because you can only do yourself, is at least what I've learned. So it's kind of the balance. Fortunately, I got away from trying to convince anybody of anything, and it's nice. You find the people who are interested in what you have to share, and you do what you can to help them. And I try and focus my time on that, and get away from, if some guy thinks that silver's not manipulated, all right, that's fine. I found that when people, I used to get started offering to put silver or bet money behind some of my views, whether I could support them. That stopped happening really quick. That everything I think is right, but if I think if there's one takeaway here, it's a great time for people to be doing their own thinking. I
Yeah.
try to get the things that I say right, but hey, maybe there's someday I'm tired or I don't see something, and I'll tell you what, there's definitely the governments and the banks. They're getting a lot of stuff wrong, in my opinion, intentionally, but
Yeah.
there's never been a better time for you to say, hey, well, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to go however someone's process is. Maybe read a bunch of stories, consider a bunch of different opinions, but just taking people who have a track record of consistently lying in a direct incentive to steal, I'm doing what I can personally to change the world in a positive way, but
That's right.
you don't have to live in this system. I don't remember last time I've seen $1 here in Mexico. And there's, it's more, I hear people say, oh, well, I can't leave, or I can't do this and that. Someone could tell me I have other things that I choose over that, but it's not like it was easy for me. I started this process 10 years ago. I left the first time, even a year and a half ago, as I was building up a business. Wasn't an easy time financially, but hey, if you own a house, we're in a real estate bubble, so you can sell the house. And I can't tell anybody else what to do, but I think the thing with the vaccine and the economy and all of it is it's worth being aware of, and that is why I chose to leave the country for the second time.
Yeah. Well, and as somebody who's still here in America, what remains of it, as I walk around in my family and I, we shop at Kroger's a lot. And as I, like the nice thing about Kroger's is, you get a mix of people. You get upper middle class, this, that, whatever, there's a lot of different people who shop there. And I like that because, I've realized that more than anything, I actually love studying economics. Like I was big into physics. I loved learning about like atomic structures and all that kind of stuff when I was young. But I didn't want to be an engineer. I didn't want to be a physicist. I didn't want to do any of that. I just liked kind of talking, if I'm being real, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. And I just, it strikes me that, like you said, we're in a housing bubble and everybody's selling, don't get me wrong, but it's almost as it like, so I say to my mother, I said, hey, I think real estate's going down. And she says, why? And I say, well, I'm looking around and I see the Evergrande fiasco, if hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, going on. And it's not just Evergrande, there's Kaiser, I believe is the correct name for them, group. There's a bunch of others over there in China. I can't even name them all, who are right now, the largest property market on earth is taking a dump. And so I was trying to explain to her, I'm like, you have to understand that when that market over there happens, because when anything happens in that market, because China's 40% of the global economy for the most part, that's going to have a ripple effect over here at some point, right? Because a lot of people don't know this, a lot of our housing here is actually owned by Chinese investors. Very few people know this. A lot of our housing here is owned by Chinese investors. Not all of it, of course, but a very large portion of it here. And so there's all these cross risks, right? There's all these cross risks inside of this financial system. That's what I call them. So I'm looking at Evergrande. They didn't pay the other day on their debt coupon. I'm looking over here at, for example, I mentioned I read your books. See, I think if the silver short positions get called on, I think that just runs the system into a wall, right? Because these banks are so massive, they're so huge, they're so over leveraged as well into these systems, right? That that silver short position of any other position I've looked at, I can't find any other position, would bring the system down. If all those contracts were called on, like JP Morgan, for, I mean, what was it the other day? They threw, I think, a year's mine supply, right? At the short end. Was it about a year's mine supply, right? And
I don't know the exact number, but it's more than they have.
yeah, exactly.
I stopped counting a couple weeks ago.
You know, and it reminds me of that Bart Chilton interview you did, which, thank you so much for doing that. I think that without that video, a lot of this wouldn't be even possible, honestly. And I remember back to where he said, well, there's never enough. There's always like a 10-to-1, right, for the futures contracts. Well, that's how the whole damn economic system works, guys. It's all a promise. It's all a promise, right? When you receive that currency note, it says on there a promise to pay the bearer XYZ upon demand, right? That is kind of why this education aspect for me is so important and somewhat irritating, is because, like, again, you know, like I said, it's all about responsibility, and I think you can agree with me on that. That people really should take their own financial future into their hands. That's what my wife, me and my wife do. I'm not relying on anybody else to take care of me, right? I've got my own setup and my own savings and all these things, and that's how you contribute to the economy, right? You produce a good or a service, and you get it out there and you contribute to the GDP. Well, the problem is, you know, like young kids like myself, I always tell my friends, start a business, right? Start a business, get yourself some income, and do what you love too. Like, this is something I love. If I could just talk to you and people like you all day and somehow get paid for it, or just not even get paid for it, but just, you know, have my business do really well enough to where this is what I could do, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because people, you can see it, you can sense it, you can feel it, right? Like the inflation, I mentioned Kroger. Well, you see all these people and you see in their eyes, there's a fear, there's a worry and a panic. I see it now when I'm in line and I hear people talking, right? They're like, oh my gosh, you know, I just bought the cereal last week and it was $4. Now it's $5, you know. Prices are going up and it's becoming the main discussion. And so few people have an understanding of why. So really quick, would you say that I'm correct, if another young person watches this video, would you say I'm correct in just simplifying what the Federal Reserve is doing as just printing a whole heck of a lot of paper and telling us it's worth something still?
Well, I guess so. I mean, mostly now they don't even print it on paper. It's just digitally created, but that sounds close enough to me.
Okay. And so the reason I say that is that, you know, I think if we can just all agree on that basic simplification, right, then someone watching this video might say, okay, well, what's the solution? So I said silver, let's get silver involved. So I went back, and for a video I'm going to be doing called A Primer on Hyperinflation, I'm currently in the middle of researching. And what I'm trying to do is I'm going back and I'm looking for all the historical examples of hyperinflation. And I'm going to contrast that with what gold and silver did, because I think there is something in people's heads that I think they think the government has a magic 3D printer somewhere, Chris. I think they think the government has a magic 3D printer that is just going to print all the silver, the gold, the oil, the food, all these things that we need. Or maybe they'll just print free solar energy somehow. They seem to think they can do that too. But there is no magic way that gold and silver expand. No government can print them. No government can usurp really the process of how they're, because government sucks at everything it does. That's my mantra. Government sucks at everything it does, whether that's roads, whether that's buildings, whether that's infrastructure. And I think if anybody needs some proof for that, please take a look at America's current government. Just take a look. But having said that, you know, silver can't be printed. It's consumed constantly, every day, nonstop. I think people think, oh, well, it gets consumed here or there a little bit. No, this is a metal that is consumed on a constant daily basis in copious amounts in all the electronics, and will continue to do so as technology advances. There's what, 500 ounces of silver in a Tomahawk cruise missile, I believe. And
I've heard that.
yeah, and this is something I really want to point out on this particular interview with you, Chris. I want to get your thoughts on this. Has anybody ever tried to dive into military use of silver? Because I'm willing to argue and bet at least 3 silver ounces that if we were to look at military consumption of silver, that it is actually higher than industry consumption of silver, because almost everything, right? That like I watched a talk from an Israeli military scientist, and he was saying your phone you have, all of it, pre-military tech, all of it was tested out and used by the military first, and then you got it. That's it, all had its origins with the military. So I'm thinking, I'm like, well, anything we get's 10 years behind. What are they always have something more advanced. Do you think that there's more silver actually being eaten up and used in the military complex than maybe even in industry itself? Is that something we could maybe say?
I mean, it's certainly possible. Obviously, they're not telling me. I know something for the Manhattan Project where they reportedly brought in a lot of silver. Bix has talked about that plenty. I mean, that's part of it. You don't know the exact numbers, but they've always all been skewed in one way, that there is a looming problem, and I've yet to find anything to counter that. And I think we're getting close to the resolution point.
Yeah, I agree. My wife, I told her, I was like, if we can still buy silver next year below 30, they figured out how to print it. That's my personal opinion. They figured out how to print it. I shouldn't say that, because following your guys' research, I know that the bastards in control of the futures market are wizards. They really are. They can pull out some interesting tricks. So, okay, so I'm going to just go over some quick reasons why I think gold and silver are important, specifically to younger folk, and also people like my mother, who is going to be looking at retiring over the next few years. I think those two particular groups need to hear this the most, because as a young person, right, you want to have a future. I want to have a future. I have kids, and I've got animals, and I've got plans. I want to have a farm. I want to have some land, and I want to produce goods that are of high quality that I get out into the economy, right? Well, I can't do that if we're going through really a hyperinflation, right? And one of the things that I think is important for young folk to understand is that no matter how old and how much people call it a barbarous relic, gold and silver are a way to, like you said, they're an inverse dollar trade, correct? If the dollar is being printed into oblivion, a physical good and service, or a physical good, I should say, like gold and silver, cannot be printed, and therefore appreciates in value against the fiat. Sorry there. So, Chris, I know you talk about this a lot. Trust me, I know you've exhausted yourself doing it. But just, could you give me, like, okay, you would buy silver for these reasons, and that's it? Because and here's why. I like Wall Street silver, but so an issue I have is the to the moon talk, right? Like, to the moon tomorrow. Well, it looks like we're going to the moon the next day. And it's not that frequent. A lot of them understand, what we're talking about here. This is more of a long-term play of appreciation against a dying fiat system. But I want you to, as somebody who's got experience with this, could you tell somebody who might go buy silver what they should expect? Like the fact that it's manipulated, right? Could you explain how it still makes sense to purchase it, even if it's manipulated?
Well, the short answer is that for every ounce of physical silver, there's, the numbers get big. Is it 500 paper claims, 1,000 paper claims? It's set up to be the end of It's a Wonderful Life. Some people don't like waiting. I mean, if you need to make a return by next month, I wouldn't recommend to buy silver, because as even despite the fact that we're getting 6.8% inflation prints, even today it's barely up. So if you're not sure you feel confident in what you're doing, that makes it a bit harder. I've
Yeah.
studied this for so long that I think it's going to be sooner than later. I don't have children, but maybe I'll have children, or 30 years from now, I'm passing it down to someone. I mean, I guess the simple way of looking at it, look at your alternatives. You mentioned the treasuries, they're negative yielding. This is the most indebted entity in the history of finance. And the best case is you give them $100, you get back 99 if they don't blow up or print more money. So, I wouldn't tell anyone to buy silver or not buy silver, because obviously that's going to be different for each person. But if those dynamics make sense, that's why I buy silver and why I am leveraged to silver, not on margin, but through different investments. To me, it seems like an inevitability. The same way some people saw that the mortgage bubble was going to have to come down. Now, it might have taken longer than they thought, and some people are cut out to wait through, and some aren't. So really just thinking these things through. I mean, I wouldn't say just because you heard this interview, go out, work everything into silver, but talk about it with, your spouse or your family members or your financial advisor. I find your financial advisors usually will just look at you like you're crazy, but you can ask them questions that they can answer. And in the end, I would just really encourage people to make their own decisions rather than blindly take someone at a bank with a long felony track record and follow that without keeping any eye on it.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of long felony track records, I did a video. It was my third episode. And of course my channel's new, but I'm really trying to stay hot and heavy on getting content out. And I did a video, episode number 3. It was entitled Silver, a Currency Comptroller and a Ticking Time Bomb, where because of the way I'm trying to do my channel, where I'm trying to keep it as like, I want kids to be able to watch some of these videos. And then there's ones like this where maybe Timmy shouldn't be in the room. But I in the research for that video, I was looking into Saul Omarova. And this is something I absolutely had to get your take and probably everybody else's take that I can interview on. So I researched her, and speaking of felony records, that gal has a record of stealing, just public theft. And then on top of that, had a record of praising systems, economic systems that are maybe known to be less free. Let's put it that way, right? Do you think that that is a signpost? Because in my video, I said, I think this is an omen. I think this is a signpost of things to come, because studying history, Mike Maloney and his Hidden Secrets of Money, he points out that a lot of the times during a hyperinflation, a dictator will come along and solve all these issues. It's whether it's Biden, Trump, you pick someone, right? You pick somebody and they're going to come along and solve it. Well, I think Saul Omarova was the omen. That may be not far out. Do you feel that America might actually get a form of socialism or communism in the near future?
They've already had it for a couple of decades, but
yeah.
I think you're seeing the final attempt by some deranged people to hijack the government, put this Keynesian socialist crap in there. I did see it looked like she got withdrawn from consideration. I don't know if that's final or not. Basically, I see the current administration, many of the past administration. Those are the guys that I'm afraid of. Those are the people that I left the country because of, and I think they're about to get caught in a big way. Did that woman get removed because that's somehow involved? It's hard for me to say. I can guess, but yeah, these people, it's the same way that a lot of these presidents are picked long in advance. They're indoctrinated with stuff from someone higher above that never shows their face, and that's the way these things go. Although that's also why I'm excited to watch the whole thing collapse, so that people who believe honesty and integrity can do so.
Yeah, and I really I hope to God that we get a they always say that it's darkest before the dawn, and I think that we're going to have some nasty times ahead. But my hope is that following that, hopefully thanks to people like yourself, and if my if I contribute to this in any way, I'll just be ecstatic. We will get a society that will learn from all the stupidity. It's stupidity is what it is. I'm not going to let people off the hook. I like to sometimes I like to be like, oh, maybe people aren't educated, maybe this or that. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and say this is stupidity here, at least in America, where, you know, we've got all these people running around printing money, and then they're telling us, oh, well, we'll just stop printing money someday. Someday, we don't know when. Someday, like the taper bullshit. I'm so sick and tired of hearing, are they going to taper? Go ahead, please do the damn taper. Will you do it already? Stop talking about it and just do a damn taper. If you're going to do it, you're not going to taper. They're not going to stop purchasing. They're not going to stop flooding the system with money. And I think that people need to wake up to that fact that, you know, just like you said, it's like, you know, the presidents, they're pre-picked. It is a planned event, you know, and I would argue that Biden did nothing to prove that he deserves this post, right? He's clearly cognitively deficient, snaps at reporters, all these things. None of this is to degrade his character. These are facts. This is public information. So, you know, I get really heated if I start going off into that. But so what I want to do is I want to kind of end this out with, I want to try to give both myself, yourself, and the viewers, all of us together, some hope to see if we can dig together to find like, okay, this whole system, right? Like, Chris, do you feel that if you own some silver, some gold, you have some skills, some knowledge, and some know-how, that we as a society, if we group together, if we work together, that we can work through this crisis? And do you think that we can be better for it? What's your take?
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, it's unfortunate that there are people think that way and do these types of things, yet I guess it really comes down to how people want to respond. I'm not saying it's easy depending on what situation someone is in. It wasn't easy for me either, but you know, that's not wherever you're living. It's not the only place in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I came down here to Mexico. I'm not saying that's right for other people, but I'm able to live here without someone chasing after me with a needle. The dollar is not really an important part of my life. So I would just suggest get out of the mindset that you need the government or some corporate employer to tell you what you can or can't do. I think some of these governments will be recognized as war criminals. So I would suggest if it comes down to protecting your own safety or following some law made by some asshole who violates it himself, you know, again, you got to decide what's right for you, but that's how I've been approaching it. And I find it's more a mindset thing. Once you realize, all right, maybe I don't know how I'm going to do everything, but I'm just going to take the first step, that goes a long way. And hopefully this was at least helpful in giving people some things to think about.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of different topics kind of just brushed over, you know, and talked about, and hopefully out in the ether. And I just want to thank you so much, Chris, for taking the time. I know it was such a freaking hassle trying to get you on to with the Omicron and the holidays and all the crap that hit all of a sudden. It just became really difficult for both myself and other people to schedule things. So I want to say thank you so much for working with me to make this happen. You know, I think people need to listen to you. I think people need to go over to Liberty and Finance and other channels like yours, Arcadia Economics, and get this information absolutely pounded into their heads, absolutely ingrained into their brains, because once you admit that there's a problem, you know that there's a problem, you can take some steps to counteract that problem, correct? And that's what this channel is all about. We're all about talking and providing solutions, and sometimes it'll just be a chat, sometimes we're going to go over things, and I am just thankful to be here. So hey everybody, hopefully you got something useful out of this. Chris, hopefully you enjoyed this. I certainly did. I want to say thank you again for the Big Silver Short, your book. It's fantastic. Anybody who listens to this interview, you absolutely need to go read it. I don't care if you get it used, I don't care if you get it brand new, you need to get out there, you need to read it. It's absolutely essential information. None of this is financial advice, guys. Chris is an expert in silver manipulation. He has taken the CFTC to task, and is still doing so. And we need to show our support, and we need to get over there and help him. If you want to start a channel and you want to start supporting these conversations, you need to do it. So Chris, thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it. And is there anything else you want to finish up with, close with?
No, I just appreciate you having me here. I appreciate that you take the time to share these things. I know it's not always the easiest thing to do, but I believe every time we have a conversation or someone, rather than calling people sheeple, I've been there and we
Yes.
all get tired, yet the more people that you can patiently explain as many times as it's needed, because this isn't just the US, it's not just Canada or Australia. This is affecting everyone. And
Yeah.
my hope is that this will be a historic time when people who believe in treating each other well, I think if enough of them realized what was going on, that would collapse these dark forces rather quickly. And anyway, I appreciate you being a part of that, and hope everybody out there is having a great afternoon.
Hey, all right, Chris, thank you. And I just feel blessed to even be able to chat with you. You are a man of integrity, a man of caliber. And anytime you are feeling down, just remember you convinced a whole family of people to start taking action and taking care of themselves. And there's a whole heck of a lot of more people out there like myself. So Chris, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for your book. If you are watching, if you are listening to this, thank you so much. This has been Devin of Defcon Economics with Chris Marcus of Arcadia Economics. And I had an absolutely fantastic time. I've got chills right now. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. This has been Devin, episode number 14, an interview with Chris Marcus. Thanks, everybody.